Now, I know we've been talking for quite some time, but I don't want to let you go before we talk about teams, right? We spoke about individuals and organizations, but there's still a bit that I want to talk to you about teams and how they
Yeah.
work together and how they deal with the same kind of uncertainties. And how does it work at a team level when you have multiple people collaborating and each of them is dealing with their own ambiguities and their own change, their own transformation, and it can be part of their job, it can be part of themselves. What makes a team work in such situations, and what do you do on a daily basis to help facilitate that?
Well, that's a lot of questions there
Uh-huh.
in one go. Well, yes, I've been working with my business partner, Jenny, on a framework. We've called it the 5 dynamics of high performing teams. And it's really like a team ecosystem, as it were, which takes a very systemic view about teams. And it says that they move, they evolve. Nothing stays the same in teams. So why do we fix things with teams? Because they're not fixed. We're members of multiple teams, often in an organization. And, each of those teams, if you think of each person learning something new every day, then you kind of shifting a little bit each individual. And how do we capture that? And how do we make sure that we're adjusting our team? So people leave and they join, and organization goals get changed. And we also have results being delivered and new results and targets being set. So all of that causes shift and movement within teams. And I think it's really important that the team has processes and routines in place, but also the relationships working well so that we can capture the value that can be created out of that energy and that momentum within the team. And you hear about, oh, high performing teams. And then when you talk to people, you realize that actually there's an awful lot of tolerance for mediocre teams,
Mhm.
that people just ticking along, being happy. And yet, when somebody's in a high performing team, the stories they tell, the passion and the warmth in their face is truly wonderful.
So what
And I
makes a team? what
think that's
what
what we're after.
what is a well
So
performing
you
team?
have to start. Simon Sinek talks about purpose. So you have to know what your own purpose is, why you're part of this team, and what you want to get out of it. Now, you might be part of the team just because it's a job and you want to earn some money, but you're spending a lot of time there. So what would be some other things that you'd quite like to get out of this time you spend in that job? So it might be great working relationships. I'd like to make some friends, or I'd like to create something new. So understanding your purpose, what would make it really great for you to be in that team and for it to be a successful, satisfying thing for you?
Mhm.
What would that be? And then link that to what the organization sees the purpose of the team. So if you can get those two to connect, and then you can connect that to everybody else in the team, and you all know what each other's wanting to get out of it, then you can collaborate and all together get your own purpose plus the team's purpose at the same time.
It
And
sounds
that's
easy.
when you get a synergy.
It sounds easy, but I don't think it's that easy.
It's a process. So we've developed a process to
Mhm.
take people both through thinking about the organizational team purpose, but then also the individual purpose, and then how you share that with all the members of the team so that the team can do it in a way that feels concrete. It feels very precious to each individual, and sometimes it's really insightful. They'd never even thought about it. The interesting thing, I did it with a leadership team, and and they run multiple organizations, this group, and they've been working together for about 3 years. And I think one person was new to the team, if I remember correctly, but they had this conversation. We got the team purpose out, or the organization purpose, and then what this team was doing. And then we went round and we did some work on each individuals, and they do it on their own to start with and then share things. And when they were sharing it, the insights, the people were going, I never knew that. Is that so? And it was a really positive thing. And people were really excited to understand what people wanted to get out of their job and what they brought to it and why they were there. And it was a really rich experience. And the team loved it so much that they have added to that and are doing things with it going on their own. So it really helped them all to connect to each other as well as to why they were coming into work every day and what they were doing. We then talk about the results
Mhm.
because, it's all very nice having all of that stuff, but actually you need to know what you're delivering because that's why the organization is paying you to come in. And so then we make sure everybody's clear about what the goals are, what you're trying to achieve,
Mhm.
and using agile methods. So this is where we go into sprints, short-term plans, reviewing them, working hard on it, coming up, looking at the results, reviewing, going forward. And then once we've identified and clarified all the results, and we come up with what's called the 5 big whats, that everybody can then remember, then we start talking about the relationships, routines, and review, and those work in harmony together. So if you change something to do with the relationships, like someone leaves, then that shifts all the relationships in the team. So you need to talk about that and work out, well, how is it all going to happen now? And that shifts the routines and then the review processes. If you change the routines, then that will shift the relationships. So making people much more cognizant about those things and working through what are they that we want to do. And the review process is there to stop it becoming a static thing,
Mhm.
because actually it needs to shift all the time. We're in a very volatile and uncertain world. And so I think, trying to say, oh, we have a weekly 2-hour team meeting is a ridiculous thing. Maybe you do it for 6 weeks for a sprint, but then maybe 2 hours is not necessary all the time forevermore. So reviewing it and saying, well, actually, let's just have a 5-minute check-in might be more relevant. So challenging some of those routines and ways of working so that they're much more flexible.
Do you feel that there's more trust between members of the team when they come to a training, and then they're more vulnerable and can discuss more authentic about what they expect from a team, or then versus when they're in a company and they have to work together every day? Or maybe it's just because they don't have the time to think about it or to have these discussions.
Yeah, I think a lot of the time people don't get that time to discuss. There is definitely something about feeling safe at work.
Mhm.
And there is also a piece of research that was done about 15 years ago where they found out that people trusted a stranger more than their own boss. And whenever I've related that to people, they've gone, well, yes, of course, because the stranger, you're never going to see them again. I mean, they have no impact on you. Whereas your boss, obviously, particularly if they're going to do your performance review, has got an impact. So there is that sort of consequences to it. So I think it when you're talking about relationships, they're very complex, and trust is a multiple aspect.
Mhm.
I think when people say, oh, we want to do a trust building, it's like, no, trust takes time and trust takes multiple layers for it to flourish, and many interactions. And it can be lost very quickly. So I think trust has to be something that is kind of looked after by the whole group. And you don't need the same level of trust for different types of teams and activities either. So, you know, I don't need the same level of trust in, an activity I'm doing one day with one person that I only work with once every 6 months and it's a small piece of work, than something else which is much bigger and has much more impact. So I think understanding how much trust and what the trust is that you need to have is also quite an important thing. So we don't need to be going around trusting everybody with everything. That's an unrealistic, um, unhuman um,
True.
kind of desire. But there's lots we can do, and many activities and tools that we give to managers to help them build that kind of safe environment, because what you want within a team is a team that can express their opinions, challenge when things are wrong without it being a challenge against the personal. So we know that good decisions are made when people can really openly challenge the content, but not the people who providing it. So that personal challenge will be taken as a personal
We
conflict
all
and an
do it.
attack.
We all do.
And we all do it. It's really, but it's hard to do.
Hmm.
But you can start to learn about that as a team and start to be able to signal to each other, actually, that's a bit on the red zone. Can you tone it back? And just go into the data, please. So that idea that we can challenge openly, because then we can stop mistakes being made, or we can learn from mistakes, because failure is not going to happen until you can tolerate that, because then people don't want to be humiliated in front of others. So,
True.
we've got lots of human aspects playing in these things.
True, but it is highly
So,
important in performing teams. That's what I find: communication and trust. And I think communication doesn't happen without trust
yeah, well, I
and
think,
that back and forth. Yeah.
yeah, MIT said the biggest difference between highly productive teams and the rest was the quality and the pattern of
Hmm.
communication. So, not so much what they communicated, but the how they communicated was what made the difference. And thinking about that, I think, is where people can really make a difference in their own teams.
True.
Yeah.
Isn't it amazing? When I started and graduated psychology, all they were talking about, all of the organizational auditors and analysts, and they were doing this organizational diagnosis. That's how it was called. I think it's still done nowadays. But the big,
I was
I was always laughing, and I said, this is not possible. The only thing that they would find is it's not working in a company would be communication. And I would say, no, I wasn't working at that point, right? I was still a student. I say, oh, come on. Everywhere I go, I mean, I can go in there, tell them it's communication, and they can just pay me the money. I don't need to do any kind of research. I already know from all of the big guys, everyone has an issue with communication. And then it turns out that actually that is a big deal, because
it is,
communication depends on so many other skills, competencies, environment, and so on. So it's still a big
yeah.
deal.
And when you've got people who are working, in dispersed environments, not together like we are, you've got
Mhm.
people with different mother tongues who come from different cultural backgrounds, that all layers on the complexity of it too. So the misunderstandings and the miscommunications, possibilities increases exponentially. So, how do you navigate through that? And I think we have to go tentatively and just be very open. And that's where that people agility comes in,
True.
where we have to keep adapting our people agility because we're learning about each other.